But it actually did change my life. It gave me a lot of confidence. It and I was able to sort of share what movement had done, because I do say in the film that to that point I had, like many women, I'm not unusual in this, a lot of sadness in my life. I'd had a couple of miscarriages, my mum had died, I had a divorce. There was a lot of sadness, and this sadness had kind of really taken root in the sort of the marrow of my bones. And rowing had really helped it, and also the paddleboarding. Just you get, somehow that grief was moved out, and somehow I exhaled it. I know that sounds a bit woo-woo, but that's really what had happened.
This is Make Movement Matter, the podcast for those needing a dose of inspiration and positivity to help them find joy in movement. I'm Wendy Welton, and my guest today is someone who certainly did that for me. Jo Moseley is the kind of person that inspires me the most because her story is so relatable, and I really enjoyed hearing her story about how being gently nudged towards trying something new by a friend led not only to something she loved doing, but brought her so much more. I started our conversation by asking her what part movement had played in her life before her change in direction.
Good question. So in my 30s and 40s, not much. I would spend a lot of time just racing. You think you're racing around, but actually if you had a phone or anything that said how many steps you'd done, it would be pretty grim. Not much. I spent a lot, I'm a single mum, just trying to manage all the stuff with the boys. I was working, both mum and dad were, having chemo and things. So not much. In my little girlhood, in my childhood, and then in my 20s, I was very active. I never thought of it as exercise or movement or anything. I just was doing things I loved. But yeah, 30s into my 40s, just not much. I very much grew up with the idea that exercise was really just to get rid of what you'd eaten. And it was something you didn't really like, and there was no real joy.
Punishment.
So I really forgotten all that joy that I'd had as a child, and then in my 20s. So yeah, it was very much that growing up in that 1970s, 80s narrative. So yeah, I had to turn that on its head, really.
So what was the catalyst then? What happened, and at what stage of your life?
So there were two turning points, really. One, when I was in my late 40s, when I, burst into tears and realized that I needed to do something, because, you shouldn't be bursting into tears and sobbing in the middle of a supermarket with your sons there. And then a friend gave me a rowing machine, an indoor rowing machine, and I started doing that. And that just started to help me feel a lot better, started to help me sleep, pieced together that I was going through the perimenopause. And then when mum died, I rode 1,000,000 meters and a marathon and 2 half marathons. And that was really
Sorry, so you rode the meters in a marathon?
Yeah, so I rode 1,000,000 meters, which is
Right.
about Edinburgh to Paris over 10 months. No, over 8 months, sorry. So I started on there, what would have been so my mum had died at Christmas 2013. And then in the May 2014, I started rowing 1,000,000 meters and marathon. So I rode the marathon on the first anniversary of her death, just 5 days before my 50th. And that was really just fundraising in her memory and just getting through that
Lovely.
grief. Yeah. And then a couple of years later,
Which, can I just say, is an amazing thing in itself.
oh, thank you. That's so kind.
That's a lot. That's a lot more than anyone. And it's like we're going to move on to talk about it. It's a big challenge in itself. And you were just doing this at home?
No. So at first, my friend gave me the indoor rowing machine, and I did that at home. And then it collapsed, this machine. I think originally she was going to take this machine to either the tip or the charity shop. And when I told her that I'd been crying in the supermarket, she gave it to me and as the stopping off point. But ultimately, it did sort of, fall apart. And so then I went to the gym, and it just became a place of really, just a place I would turn up to every other night and row, and just very soothing, very comforting. Didn't go to any of the other machines, just literally went on the rowing machine. And then a couple of years later, so I did that, rode 1,000,000.
Can I just interject there? Just what's really interesting is that with the massive rise in awareness and knowledge of symptoms of perimenopause at the
Mm.
moment. What you were facing was a while ago. Am I right in saying you're nearly 60?
Yeah, I'm 60 next year. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah, so a decade ago
yeah,
with pretty much no support. I'm not surprised you were
yeah.
crying in supermarkets, but also not knowing why.
Yeah, because I was very much of that generation that thought it happened in my 60s and it would all be hot flushes, and I've never had a hot
Yeah.
flush. I think I almost had one, but mainly I get hot cold flushes, and so for me it was all the anxiety, lack of sleep, being really tearful,
Yes.
achy joints, all
That's
that
me.
stuff. And
Yeah.
then I gradually pieced it together that it was the perimenopause, and then suddenly it was like, oh wow, that makes a lot of sense. And then, so I did all that, and that was great. And I carried on, and I went back to, outdoor swimming and swimming in the sea, all bodyboarding, all these things I loved. And then in 2016, I took my first paddleboarding lesson, and that came as a result of an injury. I'd hurt my knee, and
Ah,
I'd set myself a little challenge. I like little challenges. I like a little challenge with a little hashtag.
good.
Even if no one else knows the hashtag, they're for me. They're very much for me. Um, and so I set myself a challenge once my knee was improving to spend 30 minutes each day outside moving. And that was September the 1st, again, that whole back to school stuff. And so I took my first paddleboarding lesson 24th of September 2016, and just loved it, loved it, loved it. Like literally the minute I stood up on Derwent Water and looked out and thought, wow, I absolutely love this. So yeah, and then a couple of months afterwards,
And how did it make you feel?
Mm,
What was it that made you go, wow? What do you think the sort of essence of that was? Because you'd obviously already been doing quite a few other things.
yeah,
You've done things in your childhood and so on. What was so
yeah.
special?
I think I think there's I don't know if you know the Amy Cuddy TED talk about the sort of power pose. And I think paddleboarding, yeah, exactly. Paddleboarding has that. You're sort of standing there and you're feeling really like you're literally walking on water, and the view is extraordinary. And I think that really helped. I'd always wanted to be a surfer in my childhood, but I always thought I was just not cool enough. And I had tried surfing between my rowing and paddleboarding. I had tried surfing, but every time I surfed, I injured myself. And I thought, this is fun, but it's not that much fun every time I hurt myself because I wasn't very good. I'm not saying surfing's dangerous. I just wasn't very good at it. And so I just felt like paddleboarding has a much smoother sort of learning curve. Within a couple of hours, a lot of people are standing up. It's very joyful, very accessible, and I just felt great. And I always say I felt like a warrior, not a worrier. And my natural default position is worrying.
Oh, I love that.
That's my
Yeah.
natural place to go with every situation. And then a couple of months later, I thought, right, I'm going to paddleboard from Liverpool to Leeds, so 128 miles. But crazy, silly as it sounds, I hadn't actually paddleboarded for that much until I I'd already made this massive decision. I didn't really know how much.
So say again how many miles it was.
It
Then
was really at
it's
that
coast to
point.
coast.
No. At that point in 2016, it was
No,
128 miles. So just from Liverpool to
right.
Leeds. But when I told a few people, Christmas party season, it was like, well, that sounds logistically very difficult. It sounds quite boring, and it sounds too difficult for a woman of your age. And I was only 51, coming up to 52. And I should have
Mm,
just said, yeah, whatever. But instead I went, oh yeah, you're probably right. I probably can't do it. So I put the dream away. But then I think you may relate to this, Wendy. In your 50s, people that you care about start to get poorly. It's way too young for them, but they do. And I lost a number of girlfriends who were all really intelligent, interesting, creative, kind, generous women, just really special. Kind of, if you bumped into them in the street, you'd be like, gosh, I'm so glad I met her. That always just offered you something in
yeah.
life. And so 3 years later, it took me 3 years to, pluck up the courage to sort of revisit it. 3 years later, January 2019, I thought, right, life is just very short and precious. It's a big, big cliche, but it's very short and precious. If you have the spark of a dream, you should at least try to get yourself to the start line. Whether I finished it or not didn't matter, but get myself to the start
Yes.
line. And this time I said, right, I'm going to paddleboard coast to coast. So 162 miles, 101 locks, and a couple of hundred swing bridges. So,
So not much then. Quite just
no,
easy, just a little jaunt.
yeah, yeah,
That is just amazing. And you did it for charity as well.
yeah. So I was picking up litter and also fundraising for the Wave Project, which is a surf therapy charity, and the 2 Minute Beach Clean Foundation, which is an environmental charity, as well as picking up litter every day. So yeah,
It, it sounds fantastic. So it's really meaningful as well,
yeah.
but quite the journey. Now, so we didn't meet as such, but I met you, or I became aware of you at the Movement and the Mind conference
Oh
in
my
June
God,
21. I
yeah,
don't know if you remember that.
yeah, yeah.
And you talked, and they also played your award-winning and incredibly moving film, Brave Enough,
Oh wow.
which I was incredibly moved by and thought, I have to follow this woman. She's so
Oh,
inspirational. And yeah, it made me want to do something big as well. Haven't quite done it yet, but it made me, it was so inspiring.
oh, thank you. Yeah.
And it really, really was a really brilliant thing to listen to. And what I loved particularly was that you were a woman of a certain age, as we can call
Mm,
ourselves,
mm,
um, who had really pushed against people saying that you shouldn't. That's
mhm,
interesting that you said that, and sad, but that's often the case. But also,
mhm,
particularly, you pushed against yourself, you pushed against your own fears. You said, you know, that you're a natural worrier, and
mhm,
I can resonate with that,
mm.
and know that often it's so important. I've always said that I move half from my body and half from my mind,
Yeah, yeah.
because I've always known, I've been lucky enough that I connect to if I push myself to do something, when I don't feel like it, I know I will feel better. And for me, on the smallest level, it's just getting out for a quick walk if I can, a
Mm,
bit like you said, half an hour outside every day, up to bigger things
mm,
that I know I'll get lots of enjoyment out of. I love, like you, we've talked before about cold water swimming, which is a more recent thing, which has really helped me in perimenopause,
mm,
particularly if I go early morning and I go with a group of lovely ladies
yeah,
and I feel amazing afterwards. It can turn round my psyche,
yeah.
particularly after a bad night's sleep, literally can flip it on its head. And there's very little out there that, you know, as a tool will
Mm,
do that for you.
mm.
And so there's a lot more than just the movement in there, but it shows how movement can be so powerful. So tell me about your journey coast to coast then. Tell me about some of the highs and some of the lows, because it really was an emotional film. I felt like I was on the way with you.
Oh, that's great. That's exactly what both my film and my books people say. It's like we feel that we're with you, which is really what I want. So yes, 162 miles. You start in a really unadventurous kind of place, a housing estate, literally where the canal starts. You stop and then you walk onto the canal. It was raining. And the first thing anybody said to me was, watch out for the dead bodies. And I was like, what?
Oh,
It rained for the first few days. You pass through Merseyside, Lancashire, and Yorkshire. You go through really industrial areas, lots of litter. You go through rural areas. You go through some a lot prettier than others. You go through historic areas. And yeah, I never paddled more than about 10 miles. And I'd given myself 11 days to do it. So I knew that I had to paddle a lot more than I'd ever paddled. I think I'm very good at convincing myself that it'll all kind of be okay if I just get to the start line. So I was very, very behind with the rain and the weed. There was a lot of weed. But then one day on the 2nd of August, I paddled 24 miles and I paddled into my hometown and I paddled through
oh,
the evening with ferry lights on the towpath, ferry lights on the narrow
oh.
boats. So just so blissful. And that moment where you think, gosh, I'm a middle-aged mum and I'm doing this. It's incredible. And yeah, I arrived 162 miles later in Goole in a thunderstorm, and I went wrong on the canal. All
Good
these
old
little
Britain.
Yeah, exactly. With lovely rainbows afterwards. But I went wrong on the canal. I went the wrong way when I was picking up litter. I didn't look where I was going. I went backwards. So I actually did way more than 162 miles because I
Oh my
went wrong
goodness.
on a canal, which is astounding that anyone could be that silly. But it was a really moving, you 11 days on a canal, you think, well, what can it do? But it actually did change my life. It gave me a lot of confidence. It and I was able to sort of share what movement had done because I do say in the film that to that point, I had, like many women, I'm not unusual in this, a lot of sadness in my life. I'd had a couple of miscarriages, my mum had died, I'd had a divorce. There was a lot of sadness, and this sadness had kind of really, really taken root in my that sort of the marrow of my bones. And
Yeah.
rowing had really helped it, and also the paddleboarding just you get somehow that grief was moved out and somehow I exhaled it. I know that sounds a bit woo woo, but that's really what had happened. And
No,
realized that
I
that moved.
yes, it's a form of processing, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's I always, the oh, do you know what? I can't remember the quote that I put on Instagram recently, but it was something along the lines of for bad attitude, the best thing is a good walk, and it's
yeah,
like it totally. I've said it wrong. I've clearly said it wrong, but it it just there's something about moving, and particularly in nature,
yeah,
that changes the your I've always thought of it as when we're indoors, we're very sort of almost locked in a box, the caged animal sort of feeling, where we're kind of pacing and our thoughts are bouncing off the walls with us
yeah,
and very contained. Whereas as soon as you're outside, it feels that they're free. It's
yeah,
that there's a sort of a lighter floatiness about your thinking
yeah,
where nothing bounces, it just drifts. And often when I'm walking, I can think about something or I can kind of not. And in that sort of the way that people talk about meditation, I can let thoughts flow in and out and
yeah,
it's all okay. I
yeah,
don't know if that makes,
yeah. No,
if you
it
agree
does.
with that.
It does. And you talked about having spoken to Caroline Williams. It's very much, she talks about a journey that you actually, your body is like, I'm physically moving away from a situation. And I think any journey like
Exactly.
that, you're moving away and you're not leaving it behind, but you're saying it's possible to walk away. I know that writing my books, I'll often just be like, oh, I just can't get this word right, or it doesn't feel right, or I'm not sure I'm expressing this correctly. And I'll go for a walk and then suddenly something will just go and I'll go, that's how I need to write it. Or I'll go for a walk and go, oh my gosh, I've forgotten to put that bit in, quick, get home. So,
Quickly note it down somewhere before I forget it.
particular foul that needs an explanation. So yeah, I do feel like the paddleboarding just really helped me. And the boys, you talked about your family. My eldest son at the time was doing his master's degree, and my youngest son was going off to uni. So I was going to be like, single mom, empty nester, and I needed a big
Emptiness, yes.
dream to pull me to the future. And I did it deliberately when they were both, I think they were both traveling. And I remember one time I was on the paddleboard in Leeds and I was having like a four-way conversation with both boys and my sister on WhatsApp. And I was like standing there WhatsApping, saying, well, this is my opinion on this situation. One of them was having a situation out on his interrailing. And then I kind of looked up and I thought, oh my gosh, if I don't stop WhatsApping, I'm going to hit where they collect all the rubbish. Caught up in a weir here, which is really not a sensible thing to do. Yeah, really not a good idea. So yeah, I deliberately wanted to do it whilst they were busy doing other things, so that it was very much like mum's going to be okay. And I think paddleboarding has
Yeah,
given me that. I know that there's a place where I can go and find joy, whatever is happening, and that could be swimming, it could be hiking, it could be going on my paddleboard. But I know that I will always come away feeling better. Um, and that's knowing that knowing that you have something in your life or a few things in your life that you will know will give you joy. Not every time 100 million% joy, but you will come back feeling better, is just such a
better.
gift.
Yeah.
You'll just feel better. You know that you'll just feel better.
And would you recommend then, obviously you've made huge changes in your life.
Mm.
You obviously, you say you like setting small challenges, but I think you've set yourself some very big challenges over the last decade or more. And I know from your Instagram that you do like setting other little challenges. I watch your headstands and think, ouch, apart from anything.
I
But
know I
also we did our little get
do.
up from the ground, little movement and things like that. You do obviously embrace it.
Yeah,
And what that shows to me is that you also have sort of tenacity
yeah,
because you keep trying, you
yeah,
keep chipping away.
yeah.
If and I see that consistency, the sort of keep showing up
Mm,
cliche, but very much a truth. Um, if people find that hard,
mm.
what would you say? Would you have any advice for them about that?
I think it is just setting yourself little challenges each day, just to say, look, you know, sometimes if I'm coming back from work, it takes me more time to get my dress off to then do the headstand than actually doing the headstand, but nobody needs to see me doing a headstand in a dress. So
Okay, mental image.
yeah, I know, with my big, opaque tights that come up to my boobs. You know, nobody needs to see that. So it's just setting yourself something little that you can do for yourself. I do put it on Instagram as a kind of accountability thing,
Mhm.
but also just doing it for you and knowing it's for you and just seeing those tiny little improvements, like at the beginning when I
Yes.
was doing it, I had to just be in leggings and a t-shirt and bare feet because shoes would just wobble me over. And now I'm like in my winter paddleboarding gear. I've often got really thick boots on. I've sometimes got my buoyancy aid on. It's a really kind of harder thing, but I feel like, oh, I can do this. You know, I wobble a bit and then
Yeah.
each time I get a bit better. So I think having something small that's just for you that you feel like it's super personal. And so, you know, I know like the routes to take a dog walk. I know that that route is about a couple of thousand steps if I do it like 4.5 times a day. And then my kind of wandering is around into town, shopping or whatever, walking to work. I'll hit my 10,000. Don't always hit my 10,000 in the winter, you know, might be 8 or 9, but I just know that if I just chip away, you said the exact word, I'm a chipper away at. I'm never the fastest. I'm never the fanciest. I'm never going to race. I'm never going to be complimented on my style or my performance, but I'm a good chipper away at.
But isn't that most of us?
Yeah,
Ultimately, you
exactly.
know, if there's anything more important, and that's pretty much what I try to, the way I try to speak, because like you, I hate this phrase, but just a mum who
Yeah,
is midlife, who is making my way, trying to keep myself out of pain, having had a bad
yeah,
experience, and trying to make improvements each day. And like you say, finding joy even in the small things. And when you're moving, you can find joy. So just out on the walk, noticing the colors
mm,
changing in the seasons, noticing the berries, tuning in that mindfulness to hearing the birds sing and just thinking, wow, I'm lucky to
yeah,
be here and experiencing that. And I I really feel like if you tune into joy, you
yeah.
find more joy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's allowing yourself to feel joyful. I think I'd just been sad for so long. I didn't really remember what
Yeah.
joy felt like. And then suddenly I
Yeah.
felt it. And, you know, I was like, wow, where do I just feel, you know, alive? Not like, you know, wow, 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 fireworks, but where do I just feel at peace and calm and alive and
Yes.
enjoy?
Contentment. Yeah.
Yeah, and just that, yeah, contentment, so yeah, I'll never be the fastest or anything like that, but just that chipping away and just thinking, wow, you know, it just reminds you that you have something to contribute to the world. And there's all that research about moving and hope molecules building. And, you know,
Yes.
sometimes I will literally be feeling like, just this book is overwhelming me or this thing is overwhelming me. And then I'll just go out and I'll go, no, remember, you know, that hope molecule kind of bubbles up and you remind yourself you're very lucky to be writing a book and it's going to be really good. Like the first one was really good, the second will be fine, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. And you know,
Of course it will be.
but that comes from the moving. There's no amount of sitting there on my laptop that's going to come
Mm.
from. I know that if I just go
Which is kind of the double-edged sword of always providing content or writing about movement,
Yeah.
is that you have to tend to sit or be sedentary to do that. And I've always been quite, part of the reason I got into coaching, which was not my plan
Yeah.
whatsoever, because obviously being in pain for many years, I was thinking about just my own wellness. So I certainly
Yeah.
wasn't thinking about helping others.
Yeah.
But as I had to learn more and more, I kept thinking I need to share this, because if this is powerful for me, it must hopefully reach other
Mm.
people. But when I set up my coaching business, I was like, well, this is a great idea, because then it gets me moving, because I'm
Yeah.
coaching people, win-win,
Yeah.
doing what I love and moving. But what I didn't realize was that you also have to promote your business. And for me, it was also about getting a message across about what natural movement was,
Yeah.
and allowing people to understand by those lovely, I mean, Instagram is great for the fact you can just drop in those snippets.
Yeah.
Um, so they even understood, because I found myself when I said, yeah, I'm certifying as a natural movement coach, people would just say, a what? And then I would be explaining for about 5 minutes. It wasn't succinct. It wasn't quick and easy.
Yeah.
Everyone knows what yoga is, but they don't know what natural movement was. So for me, yeah, I agree. You end up sitting for too long.
Yeah.
And yeah, the antidote is certainly moving.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your books as well. So the first book you wrote, which I have, which was actually gifted to me by a friend, and I said, oh my goodness, I know who this is.
Oh my God.
Is about paddleboarding across the UK, isn't it? So
Yeah. Around
it's touching on all the best places. So, and then this book that you're writing is just about the Lake District.
Yeah.
So tell me about research for that, because that's presumably tiring, but also really enjoyable.
Yeah, so the first book I wrote in 2021, just as we came out of lockdown, I had my all my vaccinations, and then it was like, okay, you've got 5 months till the deadline. So I had from October to October, but we couldn't start
Oh,
moving until May. So I'd done a lot of research in the interim, and I just went around all these beautiful places, and I was really clear that I wanted to have locks and lakes and canals and rivers and docks and harbours and the sea, estuaries, salt marshes, a whole variety, so that people could paddle in the lake, could paddle in the city, in rural areas, and paddle with really interesting people. So I paddle with different interesting people and share their story, and then the story of a particular area, like one area where they have seahorses, or anchors that help seahorses, or I would paddle with somebody who was a Coast Guard or an RNLI crew, or studied orcas, killer whales for a job,
oh
really
wow.
interesting people. And then that book went, really, really well, lovely, lovely, very, very grateful. And so I wrote, this summer I went to the Lake District. We had some great weather and we had some horrendous weather. And just
That's the Lake District.
but even more so this summer was just a bit mad. Not having to watch the forecast constantly is quite a gift now. But yeah, we had some amazing weather. We had some horrendous weather, and just researched the 10 lakes that we're allowed to paddleboard, and then the ones that we can't. I've talked about that. So yeah, we're just in the editing process for that, and I had some really magical experiences with different people. So hopefully it will
Which
be
is amazing.
a success, and people will love it, and they'll
I'm
find
sure
these
it will.
people. So
And I, obviously moving, paddleboarding could be seen as a solitary thing, but it's actually really important a lot of the time that you are with other people for safety's sake.
yeah, yeah,
So from following your journey on Instagram, you meet some wonderful people, and I'm sure that's a huge bonus. I was just going to ask you, what about your friends and family? What do they think about the new Joe versus the previous Joe, I should say?
I think they're happy. Yeah, I think they're happy. I think for my sons, knowing that I'm happy is important. They don't want their mum sort of like on the phone the whole time saying, what's he doing? Although I am a bit like that now. But yeah, I certainly got like that in lockdown. Yeah, I think everybody's happy. But I think, to be honest, people that have known me since I was a little girl, it's not really a surprise. It was like the times I was took that detour in life where I wasn't doing stuff was probably the time when I was a bit lost and I sort of found my way back to myself. So I think for them, it's not particularly a surprise. My dad, I mean, it's really, my dad always makes me laugh because my dad was a sailor and a diver, and he only stopped diving in his late 70s because he'd had so many cancers and had a problem with his heart as a result that the doctor just said, look, you probably should stop diving. I don't really know why I'm saying this, but you probably not the best thing to be doing in your late 70s. And my dad, and a sailor. So it always surprises me when I say to my dad, oh, I'm just going for a dip in the sea. And he goes, "Oh, why ever would you do that?" And I'm like, "But Dad, you're the one that kind of introduced this to me." You know, my dad and I used to go diving in the 80s together, which was just amazing. But you know, he was diving in the 70s and 80s when they didn't have wets. You know, I mean, they were just had wetsuits with sort of toweling material in them, and you know what I mean. And now
Oh my God.
when he's just 19, I'll go, "I'm just going for a dip in the sea," and I'll go, "Ooh, I wouldn't be doing that." And I'm like, it's your fault, Dad. So it always makes me laugh. Whereas my mum was out and out, not really into it. You know, she liked her swimming, always head up, and it had to be warm. And she looked as glamorous coming out as she did going in. But mostly people would say, well, that's Joe. That's the Joe that she was in the 60s, 70s. So it's kind of quite nice in that respect.
and 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 I'm not going to generalize and put this on people, but would you say that it could resonate with a lot of people that perhaps they see their childhood and their earlier years, their earlier 20s in one way,
Mm,
particularly as women, perhaps who've had families and therefore given a lot of their time to raising children, and perhaps feel like they've lost themselves slightly
yeah,
in that process. And I mean, you'll probably have that amongst friends and so on. We've only got our own sphere of reference, haven't we? But
yeah.
um, do you think that that woman
Mm,
or that man
mm,
can come back from that situation
mm.
themselves? What do you think is the sort of key ingredient that can shift them forward and probably get past fears that have developed?
Yeah, I think that's really true. I think always I always just say, start small, start where you are, start today. Like don't put off till
Okay.
the conditions are perfect, the circumstances are perfect. Just, if you can, obviously I'm very able to walk, go out and do something and just notice when you feel that joy. Just notice. Like when I was learning to surf, I kind of liked it, but I didn't get that joy because it just felt like such a steep learning curve, and I just kept coming away in pain because I was very, really not good at it. Um, but I immediately felt it going paddleboarding, and I feel the same bodyboarding. I feel the same hiking. I feel the same swimming in the sea or in the Lido or the river when it's okay to to swim in the river. So I think it's like noticing that joy and giving yourself the space to say, "This is joyful. I feel alive and calm and happy, and I feel like the essence of me. I never worry what I'm looking like. I never worry. I just worry about obviously safety, obviously, but what does it feel like? And noticing that and trying different things. Like I went on an e-bike in the summer and God, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I was just like, this, I'm going to go all over on this e-bike. It gave me so much confidence to go up these hills and travel a bit further because I knew if something went wrong, I could get back. And it's just recognizing that feeling of joy and thinking, I really like that. And then doing something else and thinking, yeah, that's not for me, and not pursuing
You
it
know,
like
the e-bike,
everyone else does.
so the e-bike is a really good example actually, because both my parents have recently, not that recently, a couple of years ago, acquired one because hills were getting really tough.
Yeah,
And you can get to the point where you think, I am actually going to give up cycling
yeah,
because of something, or you give up X because of Y.
yeah,
And so actually finding a little way around it like that
yeah.
is brilliant, because then you're still putting effort in, you're still getting that exhilaration. And as you say, you're also getting to out and seeing things. So
Mm,
E-bikes are a really good example, actually. I haven't tried one yet. I haven't tried it. I must go and have a go
They
because
are
apparently it
really
is great fun.
They are really heavy. So I went up a bit of a pathway and then realized I shouldn't be going. So I had to come back down and I was like, whoa, this is a heavy thing. I did notice that, but I was abroad and I went wrong. And I was in some vineyards and I ended up at the start of a tunnel. They were building a tunnel system through this road. And I thought, I don't want to be going through the, these workmen were looking at me like, what are you doing here? What,
What's she doing here?
like literally, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm not really sure actually. So I thought, right,
Don't know myself.
yes, good question. But I knew that I'd just come down a really steep hill, and I was like, if I was on a normal bike, I would be panicking because I think, gosh, that is a really steep hill. I'm not sure that I want to go up that again. But because I knew that I had the electric bike, I was like, it's cool. I can get up that steep hill, not a problem. So I kept super calm. And then as I was calm, I went, if I cut through this pathway through the vineyard, I mean, I wasn't treading on anything. It was like a proper pathway. I wasn't like damaging the vineyards. Actually, it was an apple orchard. I'm not damaging anything. I can get back to where I started. And it was because the e-bike gave me that confidence to know it was all going to be okay. My brain was calm enough to find a solution. So I didn't need to go back up the
Yeah.
hill. I just needed to cut through. But if I hadn't had that e-bike, I would have been in panic mode of, how do I get back up that hill? What if I lose my way again? And I would have gone off
Mm.
into sort of panic mode. But the e-bike just made me just feel calm and I found a solution. So I think, yeah, it was really good. And I just loved it.
Yeah.
I was like literally zipping along going, I love this. I love this. Like I was like,
That's a great idea. It is. I mean, yeah, it's a genius idea. It really is.
yeah,
I live on quite a steep hill, and I'm always very aware of the people who look particularly relaxed going up such a steep hill at a certain pace,
yeah,
compared to the others who are slogging away in pain and dripping with sweat, like my husband is when he comes in
yeah,
absolutely covered because it never gets easier.
yeah,
One thing I wanted to ask you about was the beach clean. So I regularly see you talking about going and doing beach cleans or picking up litter and so on from rivers as you go. That's obviously something you're quite passionate about. And it occurs to me, again, that's something that people could easily start themselves in their local area
yeah,
because it would get them out and about, benefiting the environment, clearing up, walking, perhaps doing it with community.
yeah.
And it could be really beneficial and feel quite fulfilling.
Yeah, exactly. All those things. It's like this wheel of well-being. You're outside, you're making a difference in a world which just seems so overwhelmingly difficult at the moment for so many people. And you just think, like, how do I address any of these problems? And obviously, picking up litter is not going to, address the bigger problems, but it is making a bit of a difference. And you meet other people, and you
Yeah,
feel you've got a purpose. And I always say, I can't change the world, but I can change this little bit around me. And it just gives you that sense of agency. And definitely for
I
healthy
love that.
aging, you're meeting other people, you're having a purpose, you've got a connection with the online community of 2 Minute Beach Clean. There's always someone just saying, well done, you've done something. And, in a world that doesn't always sort of congratulate you. It's just really nice having someone saying
Yeah,
thank you. So yeah,
yeah.
and sometimes it's really heavy stuff. Like recently, there was this massive rope that I was like
What
dragging.
have you found? Go
Yeah,
on, tell us what you found.
like a massive piece of ghost net rope, and I was like pulling it along the beach, and the boys were like, "Mum, you want videoing this?" And I was like, "Yeah, please." So yeah, it's just a really nice thing to do, and it just helps you think, right? I am making some kind of difference, and also it's saying thank you to the places that bring joy. These places bring me such joy.
Yeah.
It's just nice to be able to say thank you and look after them. And yeah,
Oh, that's lovely. Yes.
so yeah, I'm very lucky that I can do it. The dog is always a bit like, oh God, what's
No,
she
it's
picking
brilliant.
up?
Yeah, the rubbish lady.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I think but it's also to have to set yourself goals with the challenges you have is an
Mm,
amazing thing to do.
mm,
But as you say, also to bring purpose and fulfillment by doing something that helps others is
yeah,
also a reason to meet up, share, get out, be
yeah,
consistent. and keep going, because it's a never ending thing. When you look at the hedgerows, it's absolutely never ending.
Yeah.
And, it's very sad, but we have to all do our bit. And
Yeah.
that's, all our small bits hopefully will add up to something big. I just wanted to read, just to wrap up, this wonderful quote from your website that I
Oh,
really liked. So
thank
your words read back to you.
you.
I believe, I believe we're not too old and it's
Mm,
never too late to have an adventure.
mm,
Create a fresh start and make a difference.
yeah.
Let's enjoy the journey together. And this podcast is called Make Movement Matter,
Mm,
which I think is something you have certainly been doing in your own lives, but you've clearly created what I talk about as the ripple effect, where
mm,
you will be inspiring and affecting others, giving them the confidence to do that. As you know, I'm always keen to offer practical tips and
mhm,
advice. So have you got anything to finish on that would be advice to listeners perhaps who are not in the right place they want to be in their lives, know that they want to move more and
mm.
want to make a change? What would you say to them?
I would say what I said before, which is start small, start, as you are, start today, and also surround yourself with people like you. I love going on your account. It's like, what's she doing now? And that whole,
Thank
like,
you.
picking up litter, I'm thinking, oh, I'm squatting, I'm standing, I'm stretching. And just
Yeah.
do the, like you say, 5 minutes, just, sitting on the ground, just always feel like you don't have to be at the end of the journey at the beginning. Just start where you are, start
Yes.
small, and do it for you, understanding
Yes.
that it's all about you. It's not, you know, it's not what everybody
Yes.
else.
Don't compare.
Don't compare. It is absolutely the thief of joy. And don't compare like yourself to other times when you were younger or before you were injured. Just do it for you right now. And, have a little notebook maybe and just say, look, I've started doing a kind of what are my intentions for the day? What am I grateful for? And often or actually not what my intentions are, but what I'm looking forward to, which I think is a really nice thing. And often it
Yeah,
is
I
like,
do like that.
what I'm looking forward to today is, going for a walk with the dog, or I'm looking forward to going for a paddleboard, or I'm looking forward to just spending time with the boys. What am I grateful for? And it's really interesting. It's never about the big things. It's always those little things. Just, I'm looking forward to just, doing my headstand or whatever. But yeah, do it for you. Start small, start today, but just do something every day. It's that whole time. I mean, I know the words all consistency and showing up, but it's just doing it for you, something small each day, all adds up, doesn't it?
It really, really does. Thank you, Joe, for spending the time.
Yeah.
You're a huge inspiration and
Oh,
you're a lovely person. So that really helps. And I've loved chatting to you and I love following your Instagram. I'm going to link everything in the notes so that everyone knows how to find you. Yeah, thanks very much and keep doing your good work.
thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm very, very honored.
I always love hearing my guests' movement stories or learning from them about topics they're passionate about. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.